Hi friends, what is the best gun in Apex Legends Season 10? In this video, I've got a weapons tier list for you, using the latest weapon meta to look at which weapons can help you win more games. I've got S to D tier weapons and sorted them based on their strength relative to each other. Don't forget, just because a weapon might be low on this list doesn't mean you shouldn't use it. Even the D tier weapons have their uses in certain situations. Let's jump into the weapons tier list, starting with D tier. We've got the RE45, the P2020 and the Mozambique. Previously, I would have had the P2020 and Mozambique in E tier, but they've both received a little bit of a buff this season, meaning they aren't as trash as they used to be. They're still nowhere near as good as some of the stronger weapons on this list, but certainly in arena mode they can be handy, and early game you might find that they're useful. Again, the RE45 fits in this category, similar to the P2020 and Mozambique. It's one of those that's useful on drop, but it just doesn't do enough damage per magazine to be useful past early game. Moving on to C tier, here we have the 30-30 repeater, the Sentinel, the Hemlock, the Longbow and the G7 Scout. The 30-30 repeater can be good when you hit those shots, particularly those headshots on a full charge, but the time it takes to fully charge a shot means it's unlikely you'll hit multiple headshots quickly in a row. It's also got a much slower fire rate than the G7 Scout and many other weapons, meaning up close it's quite a tricky weapon to use. I do personally prefer the G7 Scout to the 30-30 repeater. However, the nerf to the G7 Scout a couple of updates ago means the hipfire just isn't as good as it used to be, and while it's probably one of the better C tier weapons, maybe even pushing on B tier, it's just not as strong as it was, and that's why I put both the 30-30 repeater and the G7 in C tier. The Hemlock is also a little bit disappointing this season. It used to be a really strong weapon. In fact, it used to be one of my favourite weapons, but after numerous nerfs in past seasons, it's just slowly become a very average weapon. The Sentinel and Longbow also sit in C tier. Both are useful snipers, but not really the strongest weapons in the game. The Longbow did receive a buff this season and I was tempted to put it in B tier, but I just feel it's not as powerful as many other weapons. And moving on to B tier, you'll see why the Longbow and Sentinel don't quite match up to some of the other weapons. In B tier we have the Charge Rifle, the Bocek Bow, the Havoc, the Devotion, the Rampage and the Charge Sentinel. The Charge Rifle feels like a solid B tier weapon. It's a bit more versatile than the other snipers and it's got hit scan, meaning you can deal decent damage at a long range. The Charge Sentinel also sits here. I feel like it's important to distinguish the base Sentinel from the Charge Sentinel because the Charge Sentinel turns this weapon into a really strong weapon. In fact, it's got the highest damage for a headshot out of any floor loot weapon. You can down someone in one shot with a white body shield, even if that person has a level 3 or 4 helmet. That's how strong this weapon is, and I am a big fan. We also have the Havoc and the Devotion sitting here. I haven't separated out these weapons with a turbocharger on this list, but I do think if I did that, with a turbocharger both of these weapons would be A tier, but without the turbocharger it just doesn't match the consistency of the other top tier weapons, and I feel B tier is a safer place for these two weapons. I've also put the Bocek Bow in B tier after its nerfs back in Season 9. Now if we were looking at the Bocek Bow at the start of Season 9, I would go as far to say it was S tier, but since then the damage and fire rate have been nerfed, so it's not quite as strong as it was, although I do feel it's a lot more balanced, and I do feel B tier is the right place for a weapon like this. The final weapon in B tier is the Rampage. I was debating whether I put the base Rampage in C tier or B tier. I feel like the Rampage is decent and does good damage per bullet, and that makes it useful early game, but the slow fire rate will get you into trouble a lot of the time. Plus the hipfire is a lot less accurate than the Spitfire was, and that's why I feel the base Rampage sits in B tier. Moving on to A tier, we've got the Charged Rampage, the L-Star, the Mastiff, the Peacekeeper, the Flatline and the Prowler. These A tier weapons are solid weapons and should help you out in most situations. I think the Charged Rampage is a very strong weapon with a great fire rate. The slowness of its base version suddenly turns into a beast once it's charged. The L-Star is also very strong this season after the introduction of barrel stabilizers and extended mags for this weapon. It's super effective in arena mode, but now it's really effective in battle royale as well. And it's not just useful early game anymore, you can definitely carry this weapon through to the end game because the attachments make a real difference. Believe it or not, the L-Star has the same DPS as the Volt at 180. I've put both the Peacekeeper and the Mastiff in this category as well. I made a video analysis of the shotguns across a range of stats, and the Peacekeeper and Mastiff came second and third respectively. I do think both of these shotguns are very strong, and in the right hands, they might actually be S tier weapons. The thing is, they do require specific skills to make them a nightmare for people like you. For the general masses though, I think A tier is fair for these two weapons. The final two weapons in A tier are two heavy weapons, the Flatline and the Prowler. Both of these are really strong weapons and I'm a big fan. The recoil and slower fire rate of the Flatline compared to the R301, however, means it is A tier rather than S tier for me. The Prowler also has a lower DPS than the R301 at 163 compared to 189, and that's the reason the Prowler also doesn't make it into S tier. I personally prefer the Prowler with the full auto mode, and without that option I just feel like it can't quite touch S tier, although it is very close. And finally, let's move on to S tier. This is the best of the best of the best. We have the Volt, the R99, the R301, the Wingman, and the Eva 8. Each of these weapons is very special in their own right, and I would say if you can pick up and master one of these weapons, these can be real game changers in helping you improve in Apex Legends. The Volt and the R99 are very similar in the fact that they both have a fast fire rate and fairly easy to control recoil. Both can make a huge difference in up close fights. The Volt is a little bit more forgiving than the R99 as it does more damage per bullet at 15 compared to 11 for body shots. However, both are very even and much faster than any other weapon in Apex Legends at the moment. The R301 is also one of my favourite weapons this season. It's such a consistent weapon that's easy to hit shots mid-range and up close. It's got the fastest fire rate out of any assault rifle. In fact, it's got the second fastest fire rate in the game, behind the R99. Getting an R301 with an extended mag can really help you win more games, and this is my go-to weapon this season. The Eva 8 sits in S tier as well. Like I said earlier, I did a video analysis on the stats of each shotgun and the Eva 8 came out on top. Even after a small nerf to the fire rate with a bolt this season, it's still very strong. I would say the shotguns are fairly even, but the reason I put the Eva 8 in S tier is because it's faster firing, it's a lot more forgiving than the Mastiff and the Peacekeeper, and I find on average people are able to hit more pellets with the Eva 8 compared to the other two shotguns. And personally, I would always switch for an Eva 8 if I've got a Mastiff or a PK. The final weapon on this tier list and in S tier is the Wingman. I know not everyone likes the Wingman, mainly the people that don't like it are the ones that can't hit their shots. So I would suggest if you're one of those people, check out my video on how to use the Wingman. This season though, the Wingman has had a very good buff, effectively incorporating the benefits of the quick draw into the weapon. Plus the new boosted loader hop up really makes a difference for the Wingman, and it turns it into an even stronger weapon, which is a lot more forgiving now that you've got more bullets. One of my favourite things about the Wingman is that you also don't need to carry much ammo. You can get through a whole game with just one stack if you're accurate with your shots. And if I had to say what were my two favourite weapons in Apex Legends Season 10, I would have to say the R301 and the Wingman. So that's my weapons tier list for Apex Legends Season 10. Do check out my video on how to control recoil for tips on how you can improve your aim and become a pro with these weapons. This is just my opinion based on my playstyle, so please don't get angry if you disagree. Your playstyle might be different, and that means you might prefer different weapons. Guess what? That's perfectly fine. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you later.